The silver caught the morning light like a dying star. Jacob Hartwell had been watering his horse at Willow Creek when something glinted beneath the surface, half buried in the sandy bottom where the current ran shallow and slow. 3 years of riding this same stretch of land, and he'd never noticed anything unusual, but drought had dropped the water level, revealing secrets the river had kept hidden. He dismounted slowly, his weathered boots squelching in the mud as he waded into the creek. The object was small, delicate, definitely not natural to this place. His calloused fingers closed around it, lifting it from its watery grave. A necklace, silver chain tarnished black in places, with a small locket that bore the initials EM carved in elegant script. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. His hands began to shake. Eleanor Marie Whitmore, the woman who'd disappeared without a trace on their wedding day 3 years ago, leaving behind only questions and a grief so deep it had carved hollows under his eyes and silver into his hair before his 30th birthday. The woman whose memory had driven him to this remote corner of Colorado, where he could tend cattle and nurse his wounds far from pitying looks and whispered theories. He turned the locket over in his palm, his thumb finding the tiny clasp he remembered so well. Eleanor had worn this necklace every day since her 16th birthday, a gift from her grandmother, she'd told him, the only thing of value her family had left after the war. She'd promised to wear it on their wedding day, something old to honor the past and something precious to carry into their future. But Eleanor had never made it to the church. Her room had been found empty, her wedding dress laid out untouched, her window open to the morning breeze. No note, no explanation, no body ever found, despite weeks of searching that had consumed every able-bodied man in 3 counties. Some said she'd run off with a traveling salesman, others whispered about Indian raids, though there'd been no signs of violence. A few kind souls suggested she'd simply gotten cold feet and would return when she was ready. But Jacob had known Eleanor better than anyone, and running away wasn't in her nature. She'd loved him, he'd staked his life on that certainty. Now holding her grandmother's necklace in his trembling hands, that certainty cracked like ice in spring. If Eleanor was alive, why hadn't she taken her most precious possession? If she was dead, how had the necklace ended up in Willow Creek, 50 miles from where she'd vanished? The morning sun climbed higher, but Jacob remained standing in the shallow water, clutching the only tangible proof he'd found that Eleanor Marie Whitmore had ever existed at all. Around him, the Colorado wilderness stretched endless and indifferent, keeping its secrets like a miser hoards gold. His horse whinnied softly, reminding him that the world continued to move even when his had stopped. But Jacob couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the impossible weight of silver and memory in his palm. 3 years of questions were about to become something much more dangerous. 3 years of grief were about to become hope. And hope, Jacob knew from bitter experience, was the cruelest emotion of all. Jacob rode hard toward town, the necklace burning like a coal in his vest pocket. Every mile brought new questions, each more torturous than the last. If Eleanor was dead, who had brought her necklace to Willow Creek? If she was alive, why had she left it behind like a breadcrumb trail only he would recognize? Millfield hadn't changed much in the years since his last visit. Same dusty Main Street, same weathered storefronts, same suspicious glances from townsfolk, who remembered him as the jilted groom who'd gone half mad with grief. He tied his horse outside Sheriff Coleman's office and paused, his hand instinctively moving to the necklace. Show the sheriff, and word would spread like wildfire. Eleanor's disappearance had been the biggest mystery in the territory for months. Finding evidence would restart every rumor, every painful theory. But keeping it secret felt like betraying the only clue he'd found in 3 years of searching. Jacob Hartwell, Sheriff Coleman looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Didn't expect to see you again so soon. Everything all right at your spread? Found something today, Jacob said quietly, pulling out the necklace. At Willow Creek, Coleman's expression shifted from casual interest to sharp attention. He'd been the one to organize the original search parties, the one who'd had to tell Jacob there were no more places to look. Jesus Christ, that's Eleanor's, isn't it? Her grandmother's locket, she never took it off. The sheriff handled the necklace carefully, his experienced eyes noting the tarnish patterns and wear marks. Where exactly did you find this? Jacob described the location, watching Coleman's face grow increasingly troubled. Willow Creek was nowhere near Eleanor's family ranch, nowhere near the road she would have traveled. It was isolated country, the kind of place you only went if you knew exactly where you were heading, or if someone took you there. I need to ask you something, Jacob, and I want you to think real careful before you answer. Coleman set the necklace on his desk between them. You been back to Willow Creek before today? Ever had reason to go there? The implication hit like a physical blow. You think I put it there? I think a man grieving hard enough might do things he wouldn't normally do. Plant evidence, create hope where there isn't any. Coleman's voice was gentle but firm. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried to force answers that don't exist. Jacob stared at the man he'd once considered a friend, feeling the last of his trust in human nature crumble. I loved her, Coleman. I've spent 3 years trying to accept she was gone. Why would I torture myself like this? Because accepting's the hardest thing a man can do. Before Jacob could respond, the office door burst open. Martha Whitmore, Eleanor's younger sister, stood framed in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. She must have seen him ride into town, must have hoped. Is it true? Her voice cracked on the words. Did you really find something? Coleman quickly covered the necklace with his hand, but it was too late. Martha had already seen the silver chain, already recognized what it meant. Her face went white as fresh snow. Oh God, she's really gone, isn't she? All this time I kept hoping. Martha sank into the spare chair, her composure finally breaking after 3 years of being strong for her family. Jacob knelt beside her, his own pain forgotten in the face of her grief. Martha, we don't know what this means yet. Could be what? She looked at him with eyes that held too much sorrow for someone barely 20. Could be, she's alive somewhere without her grandmother's necklace, the one thing she swore she'd never lose. The three of them sat in heavy silence, each wrestling with their own version of the truth. Outside, the town continued its daily rhythm, unaware that the mystery of Eleanor Whitmore had just taken its first turn in 3 years. I want to search the creek, Jacob said finally. If the necklace was there, maybe there's more. Coleman nodded slowly. We'll organize a proper search party. Do this right. But even as he agreed, Jacob could see the doubt in the sheriff's eyes. 3 years was a long time. Rivers moved things, scattered evidence, washed away truth until only fragments remained. Still, it was more hope than he'd had since that terrible morning, when he'd stood at the altar, waiting for a bride who would never come. The search party assembled at dawn, 6 men with shovels and determination, ready to turn Willow Creek inside out. But when they reached the site where Jacob had found the necklace, they discovered they weren't alone. 3 riders sat motionless on the far bank, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats. Jacob recognized the lead rider immediately, Marcus Brennan, Eleanor's former suitor, and the richest rancher in the territory. The man who'd courted Eleanor before Jacob arrived in town, who'd never quite accepted that she'd chosen a simple cowboy over his wealth and influence. Brennan, Sheriff Coleman called across the water. This is official business. You boys need to move along. Just curious about all the commotion, Brennan replied, his voice carrying easily across the creek. Heard someone found something interesting, something that belonged to poor Eleanor. The way he said her name made Jacob's skin crawl. There was something proprietary in it, something that suggested ownership rather than mourning. Nothing here that concerns you, Coleman said firmly. Brennan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything about Eleanor Whitmore concerns me, Sheriff. I was going to marry that girl before Hartwell here swept her off her feet with his pretty words and empty promises. She made her choice, Jacob said quietly, his hand drifting toward the colt at his hip. Did she? Brennan's horse stepped delicately into the shallow water. Funny thing about choices, Hartwell, sometimes they get made for us. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Jacob felt the other searchers shift nervously behind him, suddenly aware that this was more than a casual encounter. Mr. Brennan, one of his companions said urgently, maybe we should. Shut up, Davies. Brennan never took his eyes off Jacob. I'm just wondering what kind of man lets his fiancée disappear without a trace, then shows up 3 years later with convenient evidence. What are you suggesting? Coleman's voice carried the weight of official authority. but Jacob could hear the uncertainty underneath. I'm suggesting that maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. Maybe the question isn't what happened to Eleanor. Maybe the question is who wanted everyone to think something happened to her. Jacob's blood ran cold. You think I killed her? I think a lot of things don't add up. A woman who loved her grandmother's necklace more than life itself doesn't just lose it accidentally. Brennan's horse moved closer, water swirling around its legs. Unless someone took it from her, someone who knew exactly how much it meant. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jacob could see the doubt creeping into the other men's faces, could feel 3 years of sympathy and support crumbling in real time. He was the outsider here, the drifter who'd won the town beauty, and then lost her under mysterious circumstances. Marcus Brennan. Martha Whitmore's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She'd ridden up behind the search party, her face pale but determined. You have some nerve showing your face here. Brennan's confident demeanor flickered. Miss Martha, I'm just trying to help find the truth about your sister. The truth? Martha's laugh was bitter as winter wind. The truth is that Eleanor was terrified of you. She told me about your visits after she got engaged, about how you wouldn't accept her decision. That's enough. Brennan snapped, his mask finally slipping. Your sister made a mistake choosing Hartwell, and she knew it. That's why she ran. She didn't run. Martha's voice carried absolute conviction. Eleanor would never have left without saying goodbye. Someone took her, Marcus. And if I were you, I'd be very careful about throwing accusations around. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, 6 armed men on one side of the creek, 3 on the other, and a truth that seemed to shift like water beneath their feet. Then Davies leaned over and whispered something urgent in Brennan's ear. The rich rancher's face went white, then flushed red with what looked like panic. We should go, Brennan said abruptly, wheeling his horse around. This is a waste of time. As the 3 riders disappeared over the ridge, Jacob caught Martha's eye. She nodded once, a silent message passing between them. Whatever Marcus Brennan was hiding, they were going to find it. That evening, Martha met Jacob at the old oak tree, where he and Eleanor used to sit and watch the sunset. She carried a worn leather journal in her hands, and her eyes held the weight of secrets finally ready to be shared. I should have given you this 3 years ago, she said without preamble, holding out the journal. But I was scared of what it meant, scared of making things worse. Jacob accepted the book with trembling hands. Eleanor's handwriting covered the pages, her thoughts, her dreams, her fears, all laid out in careful script. She wrote about Brennan, Martha said softly, about how he wouldn't leave her alone after your engagement. Read the entry from 2 days before the wedding. Jacob found the date, his heart pounding as he read Eleanor's familiar words. Marcus came again today. He says he has something that belongs to me, something from grandmother's house that the family missed when we sold everything. He wants me to meet him at Willow Creek tomorrow night to get it back. I don't trust him, but if it's truly something of grandmother's. I told Jacob about the visits but not about this meeting. He would try to stop me, and Marcus says if anyone else comes, he'll destroy whatever he found. I'll go, get whatever it is, and be done with Marcus Brennan forever. After the wedding, Jacob and I will start fresh somewhere new, away from all this history and heartache. Jacob's hands shook as he turned the page. The final entry was dated the morning of their wedding day. I'm scared. Something in Marcus's eyes yesterday when we arranged the meeting. I've hidden grandmother's necklace under my mattress, just in case. If something happens to me, I want Jacob to have it. I want him to know how much I loved him, even if I can't tell him myself. If I don't make it back from Willow Creek, look for me there. The truth will be there. The journal fell from Jacob's nerveless fingers. Eleanor had gone to meet Brennan the night before their wedding. She'd hidden her necklace because she'd been afraid enough to leave a message for him, in case something went wrong. She knew, he whispered. She knew he was dangerous, but she went anyway. She went because she thought he had something of our grandmother's. Brennan knew exactly how to manipulate her. Martha's voice was thick with grief and rage. I found this journal a week after she disappeared, but I was 17 years old and terrified. Marcus Brennan was the most powerful man in 3 counties. Who would believe me?
Jacob understood the impossible position she'd been in, a grieving teenager with a story that would have sounded like the desperate fantasy of a family looking for someone to blame. "Why are you telling me now? Because you found her necklace where she said the truth would be. Because Marcus showed up today looking scared for the first time in his life." Martha knelt beside him, her young face aged by years of carrying this secret. "And because I can't live with myself anymore, knowing what probably happened to her." Jacob picked up the journal, holding it like a sacred text. After 3 years of questions, he finally had answers. Not the answers he'd hoped for, but the truth Eleanor had died trying to leave behind. "Davies," he said suddenly, "the man who whispered to Brennan today, what do you know about him?" "He's been Brennan's foreman for years, loyal as a dog and twice as mean." Martha paused, then added quietly, "Eleanor mentioned him once, said he gave her the chills, the way he looked at her." The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Brennan had lured Eleanor to Willow Creek under false pretenses. Something had gone wrong. Maybe she'd tried to leave when she realized there was no grandmother's keepsake. Maybe Brennan had revealed his true intentions. However it had happened, Eleanor Whitmore had never made it home from that meeting, and Marcus Brennan had let Jacob suffer 3 years of guilt and uncertainty, watching him slowly destroy himself with grief and self-doubt. "What are we going to do?" Martha asked. Jacob looked toward Willow Creek, where the truth lay buried beneath 3 years of silence and lies. Tomorrow they would return to that stretch of water, but this time, they wouldn't be looking for evidence of Eleanor's fate. They'd be looking for Eleanor herself. The second search of Willow Creek began before dawn, but this time Jacob and Sheriff Coleman came prepared with more than shovels. They brought a wagon, canvas sheets, and the grim determination of men who knew they were looking for a grave rather than clues. They found her 20 yards downstream from where the necklace had surfaced, buried in a shallow depression, where flood waters had carved out a natural hollow. 3 years of erosion had shifted the soil, bringing her closer to the surface with each spring runoff. Eleanor lay wrapped in a rotted quilt, her wedding dress still pristine white against the dark earth. The sight broke something fundamental in Jacob's chest, but it also mended something that had been torn for 3 long years. She hadn't run away, she hadn't stopped loving him, she'd died trying to come home. "Jesus," Coleman breathed, removing his hat. "Jacob, I'm sorry I ever doubted." But Jacob was beyond hearing apologies. He knelt beside Eleanor's remains, his weathered hands gentle as he touched the fabric of the dress she'd never gotten to wear. After a moment, he carefully lifted her left hand, and found what he was looking for, a simple gold band on her ring finger, the engagement ring he'd given her, still exactly where she'd worn it in life. "She never took it off," he whispered. 3 years, and she never took it off. The arrest of Marcus Brennan came swiftly after that. Faced with Eleanor's body and her journal entries, Davies broke within hours, confessing to everything in exchange for leniency. The story that emerged was both simpler and more horrible than anyone had imagined. Brennan had indeed lured Eleanor to Willow Creek with lies about her grandmother's belongings. When she'd tried to leave upon realizing the deception, he'd grabbed her, demanding she break her engagement and marry him instead. In the struggle that followed, Eleanor had struck her head on a rock. "It was an accident," Davies sobbed to the sheriff. "Marcus never meant to kill her, but she was dead, and he panicked. Made me help him bury her, made me swear to keep quiet." "And the necklace?" Coleman asked. "Fell off during the struggle. Marcus threw it in the creek, said it would wash downstream, and no one would ever find it." Davies looked up with hollow eyes. "Guess the creek had other ideas." The trial was swift and merciless. Marcus Brennan, pillar of the community and successful rancher, was sentenced to hang for the murder of Eleanor Whitmore. He never showed remorse, only anger at being caught, muttering to the end about how Eleanor should have been his by rights. Jacob attended the execution, standing silent beside Martha as justice finally found its mark. But revenge, he discovered, felt nothing like satisfaction. Eleanor was still gone. 3 years were still lost. Some wounds, no matter how cleanly closed, would always bear scars. In the weeks that followed, Jacob made his peace with the past. He sold his remote ranch and moved back to Millfield, where Martha Whitmore had inherited her family's property and needed help managing it. Not romance, they both understood that, but partnership born from shared grief and mutual respect. He buried Eleanor in the town cemetery with full honors. Her grandmother's necklace returned to its rightful place around her neck. The headstone was simple granite with words that came from her journal. Eleanor Marie Whitmore, beloved daughter and faithful heart, the truth will be there. When Jacob finally remarried, a kind widow, who understood that some loves leave permanent marks on a man's soul, he would still visit Eleanor's grave every year on what should have been their wedding anniversary. He'd bring wildflowers from Willow Creek and tell her about his life, about Martha's children who called him Uncle Jake, about the school they'd built with money from Brennan's seized assets. And sometimes, when the morning light hit the creek just right, Jacob could swear he saw silver glinting beneath the surface, not jewelry this time, but something cleaner and more precious. The light of truth finally surfacing after years in darkness, the promise that some mysteries find resolution even when hope seems impossible. The water continued its eternal flow toward distant oceans, carrying away the last traces of tragedy, and leaving behind only memory, love and the hard-won piece of questions finally answered. Eleanor Marie Whitmore had come home at last.